Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Joining Michael on the show today is Ryan Kutscher. Ryan is a writer, creative director, and the founder of Circus Maximus, a renowned marketing and branding agency with 12 full-time employees. Now, as you're going to hear, Ryan outlines some of the challenges that consultants, including himself, may be having in this current economy to grow their firms. And this is why it's essential to have a clear plan for growth. And that is where the Consulting Success team can help you. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to learn more and apply today. So let me tell you a little bit more about Ryan, who has an impressive clientele that includes notable brands such as Vitamin Water, Gillette, Crest, and many others. His insights and work has been featured in prestigious publications like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Forbes. But as you're listening to today's episode, there's a few things I want you to focus in on. The first being how psychology plays a role in economics and advertising, how to avoid falling for the shiny object syndrome, Ryan's 5-step process to help you navigate the highs and lows of being an entrepreneur and consultant, how to ensure your pipeline doesn't dry up, how to create a productized service to help you scale your consultancy, and why Ryan wants to take the restaurant business model and apply it to his own practice. Here to share with you his full story and expertise is Ryan Kutscher. Enjoy.
Hey, Ryan Kutscher, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your kitchen office, it looks like.
Yeah, there is a kitchen and it is the office. Everyone always kind of wonders, like, is that a background or is it the real office? It's an industrial space. So if I pointed upward, you'd see pipes and all that kind of stuff and just open it up in the office here. So, but let's come back to you, man. I think I'd like to start the early days because you have a Bachelor of Science in economics from our research. And I'd love to know how you went from that to becoming a creative director. What did that kind of path look like?
Yeah. I mean, I'm laughing because it's the least scientific thing, but I don't know what else you call it. Economics. So when I was in college, you might call university, I was always fascinated with economics and I love to write and do all these creative things. But by the time I got to college, I think most people were sort of communicating that there was no future in that kind of behavior. So it's like, get a real major. And economics was appealing to me for the fact that it was human behavior. There's like a science to it in a way, but it's kind of artistic. And like a lot of it comes down to persuasion in the way that, so in economics, for example, all of the theories start with making an assumption. Mm-hmm. And the first assumption that they always make in economics is that people act rationally. And I was like, well, that's not true. So the whole science of economics is basically built on a lie, but lies are very persuasive. And I kind of like that nuance of like, okay, well, I mean, let's roll with your lie and see what happens. And I don't know. So that was always kind of the psychology part of it that I enjoyed and like kind of claiming an art to be a science. And then that ultimate you can't I guess you can go graduate and become an economist, but I didn't know any of those. And so it kind of led me to wonder what I was going to do with my career. And as a senior in college, I was exposed to advertising. Obviously had seen advertising before I went to college, but didn't really think about it as a career. And it sort of cherry picked the best parts of economics about kind of making some assumptions, telling some lies, and seeing what happens to human behavior. And I was like, that's a career, man, I'm in. And then I got to do all those creative things that they basically told me there was no future in, such as write stuff, tell stories, come up with crazy premises and play make-believe and all that stuff. And so advertising as a career came into focus.
And for you, was that from a young age? Like when I think back to the people that I know who studied economics or are involved in economics today, they tend to be a bit more on the financial side. I rarely hear people say things about psychology, unless it kind of relates to psychology of investing. But to me, it sounds like you were drawn to this idea maybe of persuasion or storytelling, or just really like the human psychology. And that's not the typical thing that I've heard from people that are in the world of economics. So I'm wondering, was there something even before you started studying economics and being interested in that, kind of looking back at your childhood, that now you can see like, there's a connection to how I ended up in advertising and consulting and helping organizations and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think when I was a kid, many kids probably are very creative, and I focused almost all of my attention on art, and I love to draw and illustrate, and I would write comic books. And getting into kind of high school, like normal kids probably went and did like football or something in the summer. I remember I did a program where it was like I was taking college classes in creative writing. So kind of a nerd, but I was kind of indulging in that creative side of my brain. And again, like you get to college, and economics also, by the way, didn't have a lot of credits to major in it. And some of the stuff that I never really indulged in was called econometrics. And that was the premise that you could kind of isolate and identify all of these variables in the economy and kind of tweak them to come out with some prediction. And now, of course, that's always wrong, false, and takes that idea of economic assumption to its unnatural conclusion. But the side of it that I liked was probably what we would now call behavioral economics, which is like, oh, it's the economy of attention, or the economy of power, or the economy of confidence, or things that really are based in human emotion.
Right.
And that was the link back to like writing a story to get someone to feel a certain kind of way, or doing a comic book that makes you excited, or has a story about someone that, like Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man, and he's a normal kid that's able to achieve these incredible things. And it's like, those kinds of stories are the ones that we tell in advertising. If you use Axe body spray, you're going to become Don Juan. Like, it's all that make-believe stuff that happens in your mind, but it does get filtered through the world of commerce.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So let's fast forward. I think in 2013, you have a bit of experience at this point. You decide to start your own kind of agency, Circus Maximus. So tell us what kind of played into that decision to start this company.
It was basically like a real hazy entrepreneurial instinct, and the idea that, well, I want to start my own business. I want to be the benefactor of my own skill. You know, I don't want to necessarily ply my trade for an agency that charges my hours at a multiple that I never see. So there was some greed. I guess there was some greed. There was some like this just desire to be like, this is America. You get to start your own business if you want. And I really had no idea how to do it. I still am like trying to figure it out, but that's what the inspiration was. It's also like, I didn't ever like the idea that working for someone else, no matter what's going on, one day they can just walk into your office and go like, you're fired.
Right. Yeah. It's so common. Like we hear this all the time. People that ultimately want to take kind of their destiny into their own hands, right? Be in control. And as you said, a very common one of realizing, you know what, I'm making, let's just call it $150 an hour, but somebody else is making $300, you know, and they're charging me out at that. So there's that margin that you wanted to capture. So when you made that decision to start this company, how did you go about getting your first few clients? What did that look like?
Yeah, I just want to touch on the last question real quick. 3 things, because you just pointed out fear, greed, and irrational confidence. Why?
But that actually, just to drive that point a little bit more, that the confidence is actually really critical. Like if you don't feel confident, then like you don't have to be rational, but just you have to have that belief that you can be successful. Otherwise, you have no chance. So even though you don't know what you likely need to know, it's still okay because you can still make progress and figure things out. I think like what you're raising right now is something that a lot of people who might be not taking action right now because they feel like they don't have all the answers. You're never going to have all the answers. It doesn't matter if you're at 0 or 1 million or 10 million or 100 million like that, or beyond. There's always more to learn.
And by the way, like that feeling of, I don't think I have enough information and I'm afraid, I feel that every day, every single day. And it's like, I'm thinking about other ventures that I've started to consider recently. And I'm feeling that feeling again. And I'm like, I wonder if I should do it. And I'm thinking about like differences. Now I'm 44 and I have a child and I have a bank account and I have a savings account. And I'm like, you almost have more stuff the older you get to kind of stoke that fear. But everyone has it. And you kind of have to get through it.
How do you do that? Because I mean, right now, like for people who have heard in the intro a little bit of like what you and your company have done, and you work with some very impressive brands and built a pretty nice business that's growing. But how do you process that fear, or when you're in that situation, when you want to do something, but there's some hesitation, there's some fear, what do you go through? How do you kind of navigate through that?
Well, look, I'll be completely candid this year. Like, I think many people, I don't know, you probably serve a broad audience of listeners. I happen to work in the advertising business. My industry, I can't tell you exactly what happened, but somewhere between last year and this year, it was like we were hit by a meteor. So that irrational confidence that I had last year, gone this year. The business that I thought was like, oh, I'm killing it. This year, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. So sometimes it gets served at your doorstep. And I think that it's sort of this, I mean, like when I was an employee, I was afraid that someone could come in and tell me I was unemployed. As an entrepreneur, you kind of just are drinking from that same fire hose, but instead of your boss, it's the economy or your business model or all these things.
Yeah.
How you overcome it is just that nagging voice inside that's like, I just think that this idea is going to work, or I have a perverse fixation on figuring out this business model, or like, it's just like kind of an unresolved thing in your head that you just kind of have to do. Malaise, you're sitting there you're like, I'm really bored, or you're thinking about like, what legacy am I going to leave when I'm 80? Am I going to regret not indulging this idea? Like, it's fear of a kind, but like, it's the like, what if I don't? Complacency. Like, yeah, I mean, you got a nice house and a car payment and all that stuff. And you're like, but am I happy? Whatever. Like,
yeah, let me drive into this a little bit more, because I think we're going in a direction that I didn't necessarily plan, but I think that's fine. That's part of the fun of doing these podcasts. But you're hitting on a point that I believe is relevant for a lot of people, right? So we talked to a lot of clients that at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, were going through exactly what you're mentioning, where all of a sudden budgets were getting kind of frozen, or companies were hesitating to make an investment, or they're delaying things for a quarter or several quarters. By June or so of 2023, we've seen with many clients, things have started to loosen up, that they're getting called in. Companies are starting to kind of pick up the spending. Now, that's going to be different depending on multiple or multitude of factors. But for you, when you're in that position where, let's just say you're counting on some business coming in and now it's frozen or it's delayed or it gets cut. And as you said, you're wondering like, well, where are we going to even be? And like, how are we going to handle this going forward? I'm wondering, from an operator and an entrepreneur and kind of a CEO position, what have you been doing, or how have you kind of navigated that to keep things going?
You want the truth?
Yeah, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Step 1, stop drawing a salary. Step 2, look at your revenue projections and see where you can cut unnecessary spending. Step 3, you start looking at your OpEx. Here's my staff. Here's what I got coming down the line. How do I find space here? Am I going to do layoffs? Step 4, I got that lifeline at the bank. I got that loan. I got that line of credit. Step 5, like, okay, what's my burn rate? How long do I think I can go? Do I think I'm going to have pipeline in that timeline that's going to allow me to like make this gamble that, yeah, I'm going to take that line of credit and go for a couple months, pay my staff with that. But I know that in Q4, I'm going to get that revenue that's going to make it all worth it. And I just got to get through this hurricane.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the answer is, I don't have the answer.
It's still in process. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like, I mean, there's other factors that are in play about like, how confident are you in the return? In advertising and maybe in other client services businesses, you might get lucky because you only need one client to come in and save your ass. But those are kind of like the calculations. Some of them are just math problems on a spreadsheet, and some of them are sentiment. Like I have a lot of conversation. I had great conversation this morning with a guy who has never been a colleague of mine, but is a guy that I really trust in the business and works in business development. And like, I'm just trying to kind of triangulate what he's saying, what he's telling me about his business with what I've just heard with my other friends that have small businesses, my friends that work at large agencies. What are they hearing and seeing? And like, can I create some sort of unified theory about what's going on in the economy and how it might impact me? And it's like, so there's some math problems and there's some guesswork going on. I've lost all my hair.
Yeah, well, I lost mine a long time ago. Is there anything that you've done as part of the process to this point that has been surprising to you, either in a positive or negative way? Like you did something you thought, well, that actually saved us a lot of money, or I didn't expect that, or wow, like that was a dumb move. Anything that's kind of popped up for you as you've been making these decisions?
Man, it's a lot of like, God bless my wife for supporting me through this. But it's been a lot of like kind of spouse therapy that she's been giving me. Surprising decisions is like, I mean, I think it's definitely caused me to become more analytical and to sort of like dig into my CFO and probably my account team are sort of going like, man, this guy's a little bit more active in my swim lane these days. So really digging into the numbers, I guess, probably for a guy that really, as I mentioned at the top, like more of a comic book artist than a mathematician, but like getting into the numbers and sort of like critically analyzing how we go to market, because what we've seen is pipeline dry up. So then you're like, well, why would that happen? Factors that are out of my control versus factors that are in my control. And I think you start to, I'm trying to like let go of the things that are out of my control, but really hoping to get better at the things that are in my control. And things that are in my control are like, how am I positioning myself?
Right.
Creating innovative kind of products that I can tell clients about that address what they're dealing with, which is everyone kind of in that penny pinching mode. And it's like, I've really thought about how to repackage advertising in, like I call it the McDonald's menu of like, it's like a prefix, like, here's what you get, here's what it costs, here's how long it takes, here's the deliverables. That's really great kind of thing. And trying to roll that out. So you kind of get creative, I guess.
Yeah. And what's your head count today?
I think we're 12 people. We were 22 last year.
Okay. So you did have to make some cuts.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah. For those that might be in a position where they're thinking like, I might need to make some cuts too, but I've never done that before. What suggestions, what have you found? Like, I mean, it's never easy, but what advice would you offer them in either analyzing when to make a cut, but the second part would be to actually to do it? Any suggestions or advice around that?
So, I mean, look, I guess in your gut, you kind of know what you got to do. And your CFO, or you may be a CFO, is going to tell you on the numbers. You know, I actually saw a piece of advice from the Airbnb CEO.
Brian Chesky, I believe.
His advice was like, make the big cut so that you don't have to do it multiple times, because that starts to wheedle away morale.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that thought. I mean, this is kind of dark conversation, but I guess the other thing is try to be as transparent as you can. That doesn't mean tell everybody everything, but try to be as open as you can about how and why. In an economy like this, at least in my experience right now, it's like, I'm not firing anybody. It's called a layoff. And it's like, guys, we work with a business model and everyone here is supported by the revenue that we go get. When that changes, our employment changes. You maybe say it a little bit more sensitively than that, but like, that's kind of the gist. And it's like, just try to be kind to people, I guess. In some cases, like I've got really talented people that like, I've tried to cut people that I think could freelance really quickly and easily and well. So I'll be like, we don't need you right now. I might need you again, but I want you to talk to this person, and this person, because they need someone like you.
Mm-hmm.
You would crush it there right now. To the extent that you could sort of be flexible, I think smaller agencies probably are flexible in that way. And I'm trying to open the network up to sort of say like, hey, look, I believe that you're a talented person and you've done a fantastic job. If I can help kind of create a soft landing for you or open up a new opportunity for you over here, I'm doing that. So that's maybe something people might want to consider if they can do that. Yeah, because it's people's livelihoods, you know.
100%. Let's talk about the pipeline. You mentioned that that's one thing that you have seen dry up. What changes? What are you doing differently? How are you kind of thinking about attacking that to get the pipeline back up?
Look, I think you call everyone you can. And your question was like, how did you get your first client? It's like the same way I got my last client, like call, dig into the network. I have software that kind of tells me how my conversations with my clients are going.
Like a CRM of some sort, or?
Yeah, I use Copper, but I've also created a spreadsheet.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
So Ryan, just for those that might not be using a CRM or kind of wondering, like, what do you mean? Essentially what you're saying is inside of a CRM, right? You can set to say, remind me every X number of days or whatever to get, to ping or to get in touch with this person. So you're getting those prompts, those reminders, and you're just making sure that you're staying in touch with people. Is that correct, or anything else that's different?
No, I mean, that's the gist of it. I mean, depending on which one you use, it will sort of tell you like, hey, here's the 3,000 people that you've been emailing with over the last 3 years. You can assign different members of your organization to be their point of contact.
Right.
I'll go back through that and kind of like hit people up. Like, you can get more or less sophisticated with it. You can do kind of like, I don't do this, but you can do like chain emails. I try to keep it personal. So like that I know.
Yep.
And I'll reach out to them. And I found one surprising thing. You asked this question. I think one surprising thing is like sort of how happy people are that you've gotten in touch with them, even if that there's no opportunity at the moment. I think that was probably we've all gone remote, or at least I have. I think nurturing is a light bulb moment of like, got to nurture your network, even if that's emails and texts and stuff like that. I have a business coach, and he kind of put it point blank to me. He was like, if your life depended on it, what would you do right now? And I was like, I'd call everyone I know. And he's like, see you next month. That'll be $5,000. So that's kind of how that's gone.
I want to go a little bit deeper on that. When you say calling people, emailing people, I think those that are joining us right now would find it helpful. What is the approach? Like, what are you actually saying in your emails or in the phone calls when you're reaching out to people? Like, are you talking about what you've been doing and how you might be able to help them? Is it just like, hey, how are you doing, Ryan? It's been a while. Like, what's going on in your world? What does that kind of the arc of that conversation or that outreach look like?
Yeah. I mean, again, like I try to keep it sort of personal. So a lot of people, look, we all know what's going on. So I'll reach out. A lot of it is just like, hey, how you doing? I have a client. He's not even a client. He's a guy that I met that is sort of in the network. And I knew that they were affected by the First Union Bank thing, Silicon Valley Bank.
Right.
And not First Union, Silicon Valley Bank. And I sort of reached out and was like, are you all right? How are you doing? Like, have you been contaminated by this? Just curiosity and like genuine, like, are you guys doing all right? Icky to even call it like a tactic. You know what I mean? It's like, call it empathy. Yeah. But for other people, it's like, hey, we just did this thing where like we were able to do this amazing kind of production at this ridiculous budget. In so doing, we kind of came out with a formula that we think could be relevant. I don't know if it makes sense for us to have a conversation about this. Is this something you guys are thinking about? I know budgets, but here's a way that we've kind of worked around it. So like if we're offering value in that way, potential clients, or I'm following up of like, hey, we had that thing. I don't know if that went well for you guys, or like, hey, here's an event that happened. We thought you guys might be able to comment on it like this, or be giving it an idea, or kind of keeping it personalized to whomever you're reaching out to. Some could be just a check-in, could be an offer, could be like a, hey, we thought about you, could be like, is this interesting kind of a thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate those examples. I think those are great and will be helpful for people. What are you seeing so far in terms of response? What's the sentiment? What is it kind of starting to produce any outcomes, or like, what are you seeing from the activity?
I think a combination of things. Like we've yielded some opportunities that way.
Right. Yeah.
We did a brand ID for a client, and it was like, came out great in the world of fintech.
Nice.
We did another one for a company that's doing a customer service AI platform. We did a brand identity and some work with them. And then I think it was like kind of pursuant to something you talked about earlier, like what have you learned or been surprised about, was like really reevaluating our positioning. Is it clear? Is it concise, compelling? Really, I got this idea in my head that everyone tells me I'm crazy to do it. But every time I think about it, I'm like, I think I got to do that. And it's like, it's kind of a prefix business model idea.
When you say prefix, what do you mean? Like a productized offer or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's hard. I mean, because we work in customer service. In our go-to-market, in the life of my business, we've always been this sort of white glove service. And the benefits of that is that you get this real high touch interaction, and you're getting a lot of personalized attention, and we're sort of troubleshooting and problem solving things that kind of may or may not live within the scope. But the world is getting more and more complex in the world of advertising, and that feels less and less doable. And so what I've kind of like, I've just been like, I'm trying to basically take a business model from like the world of restaurants and apply it to advertising, which is a hard thing to do. But the idea is there's always three questions my clients ask, and maybe other consultants get this too. What do I get? How much does it cost? How long does it take?
Mm-hmm.
And there's never an answer. And I've been trying to come up with the answer.
Yeah.
This economy has kind of forced me back into that world of thought. And so hopefully I'm going to be able to solve that.
So on that, I mean, I think you're definitely going in the right direction in terms of that's worthy of exploration. We've actually worked with a few clients in the kind of branding ad space, helping them to develop productized offers. And I know that it can actually be very successful. So we can talk more about that afterwards. But I'm wondering, when you said like the economy is becoming more complex, hard to provide that white glove service, add a little bit more context to like, why are you feeling that? Or what are you seeing that's making you believe that that is the case, that it's harder or the world is more complex? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, there's a lot of confusion. And like, even if you just maybe take a snapshot around the media landscape, right? Of like, all right, well, you've got all your traditional media. Now you've got your online digital media. You've got online video across platforms like YouTube and so forth, and Hulu, and everyone else is now Netflix. They're all rolling out digital creative platforms, and they demand your creative to look and feel a certain way. Oh, we're in the social media world, and you've got Meta, which has become kind of like the bulletin board of the internet. And then you've got TikTok, which I don't know that I would trust the analytics from TikTok very much myself, but like there's kind of an awareness thing that's a really tantalizing component of that platform. And just even in that like field of conversation, it's like, as an advertiser, I've got to think about how I can create unique content for each of those channels. My advertising budget didn't increase. It decreased.
Right.
And so I'm kind of paralyzed by how do I do it? And like, which one is valuable? And I found that the beginning of many relationships in my line of work usually involve some kind of consultative aspect that we're not really charging for.
Mm-hmm.
To help CMOs, clients, brand managers, CEOs first make the decision of like, what the hell should I even be doing right now? And then once we decide that, we're lucky if that service is something that we actually provide. Do you know what I mean? We get this kind of broad view of the landscape. And that's what I mean about kind of having to do more with less.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like landscape that is getting ever more complex. And so I guess I sort of feel like it's my job to make it as simple as possible to know how to interact with me as a business and a brand. I can do that. I've done an amazing service for a client before we've even had a conversation.
Right. But what I'm hearing you say is essentially finding something to productize, or like taking an area of expertise that you and your company feel very confident where you can deliver a result that is in demand or something that your clients want, and figuring out how do you package it, put some good systems and processes around it so that it's less custom, even though the end product is customized to each client in terms of their content or their ads or whatever it might be. But it's a process that you can run people through. So less variables, and slicing something that is easier to sell, easier to explain, easier for people to buy.
Yeah. I mean, I think like at Circus Maximus, which is my agency, our tagline is we help you get your story straight and tell it well. And it's like, well, we got to do that for ourselves too. And one way to do that is to be really succinct about what you offer, who you offer it to. And at this point, how much does it cost? But I think what happens in an economy like the one that we're in is that like all these variables start to happen and you start to second guess yourself. And you're not sure why your client pushed that budget for two. And then you start to like, well, when things are going really well for a brand or a business, they're in the pocket. They're delivering the thing that they're really good at to clients that really need it, and everyone's happy. In an economy like this, those opportunities are a little further and far between. So maybe you start to stretch a little bit about like, oh yeah, we can do TikTok, even though you're a TikTok agency, or we can do planning. We'll take on a comms planning project when really we're a brand identity team. Or you start to kind of like work in adjacent markets, and pretty soon you're like all out of whack and you don't know what the hell you're doing. And now you've created this confusion for yourself. And that's certainly been something we're trying to avoid. At the same time, you kind of want to like a really strong brand and business knows what they do and doesn't do what they're not good at.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to do that in this economy where those opportunities are fewer and far between. And you're like, well, I still got to make my revenue. So I guess I'll say yes to this thing that we're not great at, or like, it's not our core competency. So I'm trying to avoid that. And in order to avoid that, I got to really define what we're good at. And hopefully that has value to the market.
I think the lesson inside of that for everyone is that, I mean, here you are, 10 years or so right into the business, and you're still thinking, as every company should, about how to further dial in the positioning, how to optimize certain areas of it. What do you really want to be known for? Like that's just something that smart entrepreneurs do. You're not just going to sit and be complacent. You're going to always look to evolve and to optimize and to be agile depending on what's happening with the world around you and the clients around you. So I'll share some thoughts with you as well afterwards on this, but I'm excited to hear, Ryan, on how all this progresses. And as you continue to build and get through it, because there's a lot of people right now who are dealing with something similar or in one form or fashion. But I think that's what ultimately kind of separates successful entrepreneurs from those who struggle, is those who struggle tend to give up, or they freeze and they don't keep taking action. But you're clearly taking action and you're starting to see some results from it. So keep it up, and excited to get an update from you.
I don't know what form it's going to take, but I mean, I think succinctly, Ray Kroc famously said, I don't know what people are going to be buying in 50 years, but I'll be selling it. I think that's the sort of mentality that I hope we had that as an agency prior to kind of the economy forcing that level of thinking on us. But certainly we're doing it now. So here we are.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that people can learn more about you, try and follow along. I mean, definitely see the great work that you guys have done as a company. Where's the best place, kind of the one website for them to go to check all that out?
circusmaximus.com.
There we go. All right. Well, Ryan, thanks again so much for coming on.
Dude, thank you. Thank you for being flexible with me too.
My pleasure.
And there you have it for today's episode between Ryan and Michael. If you enjoyed today's podcast, then as always, be sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to your favorite shows. And if you want to help support the podcast, you can do so by heading over to Apple Podcasts, where there you'll have the chance to leave a rating and review. Again, if you're looking to grow your business and consultancy from 6 to 7 figures, then the Consulting Success team can help you. If you want to work directly with the team and receive personalized coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, just visit consultingsuccess.com to learn more and apply today. That's the end of the line for us today. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until next time.